Metrics in Coralogix form one of the fundamental pillars on which the observability platform is built. Metrics, simply, are numerical values stored in a time series fashion. That is, they are numbers stored over time. That way you can view numerical trends such as CPU usage, memory usage, latency, and so on. Metrics are really powerful because they don't require very much memory to hold, and they don't require much compute to query. This means that they can be held for a very long time, very cost effectively, and still maintain their performance. To begin, we're going to explore some of the basics of metrics, so some of the common tools that people use to integrate with Coralogix, as well as some of the common configurations that you'll need to be aware of to have a really nice, successful metric strategy. So metrics in Coralogix are really straightforward. They are stored as Prometheus metrics, and so every single time that you integrate with your metrics in Coralogix, you will use the PromQL syntax. That means alarms, queries, dashboards, anything. If you're using metrics, it will be with PromQL. And this is nice because there's no new proprietary language to learn. If you have had any experience with Prometheus, as many engineers have, then you can already use Coralogix metrics out of the box really simply. Now, your deployment will have two basic configurations, collector and exporter. These two components are responsible for exposing and pushing metrics to the Coralogix platform. The exporter is what makes your metrics available in your service. So for example, you can have a Kubernetes node exporter, metrics exporter. And what that will do is make the node metrics like CPU and memory available for collection. You can also have Prometheus SDKs as an example to run in your application that will make metrics available on a given endpoint of your application. All of these essentially surface the data. The collector is then subsequently responsible for scraping all of those metrics and sending them off to their central storage, whether that's a Prometheus server or in this case Coralogix. It's important to know that you have two of these. So really common cases, OpenTelemetry is a really common tool to use for collecting metrics, just like Telegraph and Prometheus as well. OpenTelemetry is nice because you can use OpenTelemetry to collect your logs, metrics, and traces. So it's a good way of getting on top of the tool sprawl, using the same tool for all three of the major observability data types. It's really quite powerful. So some basic configurations before we get into the features in Coralogix. Firstly, if a metric is missing, you should begin by looking in the exporter and making sure that that metric is available in the exporter. It can be for a number of reasons. Maybe there's a configuration issue that you need to review, or quite possibly it's simply not being surfaced because it's not part of the core metrics that are sort of exported as part of that tool. So if you're missing a metric, start there. Start by looking at the exporter. The second place to look is then the collector. So it's possible to block certain metrics in the collector. I would check there as well. So if you're seeing a metric and it's not appearing in the Coralogix platform, check your exporter, check your collector, and make sure that no configuration is meaning that metric is being hidden. This will just save you a bunch of time with other investigations, because this covers like 90% of the reasons why metrics are missing. The second thing to consider is the scrape interval. So what is the scrape interval? So if we go to this graph here, you can see that I have a last 5 minutes granularity. You can see that every minute on the minute, the metric changes. And it's exactly the same in between. Nothing changes in between. This is because these metrics have a granularity of 1 minute. So at a high level, it doesn't really make much difference. You see 30 minutes, everything's just kind of changing there. It's only when you get down to the detailed level that you can actually see these flat lines. So this is the way that you know what the interval is for your metrics. You look for these changes at the low level, and this will tell you what your granularity is. It's very, very common to run a granularity of 1 minute. This offers a nice balance between not taking up too much space and not using too much data, and not losing too many insights because you're missing key information. So for this particular case, the fluctuations that are in traffic, these are actually latency metrics that have been generated. The fluctuations in traffic mean that any granularity less than a minute would offer so much noise it would be pointless. And still you get that nice high-level view that you can explore all of your data at this high level as well. So for granularity, go with a minute and work from there. The 60-second standard is very, very normal, very, very basic. The next thing to consider is your labels. So all metrics can be decorated with labels. Labels enable you to query your metrics from many different ways and many different directions. And what this allows you to do is label, for example, latency can be labeled with the action on which was being invoked. So you can see here that a lambda function was being invoked by this particular metric. Same thing with these metrics down here. These are all labeled with the action. Now, this is really powerful because it means that you can visualize, calculate, and group your data based on these labels. So when you're thinking about your labeling strategy, think, how do I intend to query this data? How do I intend to view this data? Is it by host? Is it by application? Is it by IP address? And make sure that those labels are present in your metrics before they're exported to Coralogix. That way, you can guarantee that your data can be queried in the ways that you want it to be queried. Now, as we said before, everything is in PromQL. So as an example of this, if you open up an alert in the Coralogix platform, and you go to New Alert. If you select Metric here, you're presented with a PromQL dialog. And if I start to select, you get the nice autocomplete as well. This is just standard PromQL, so you can use any PromQL query you want. It will work in this. And if you click this link here, you'll get the Prometheus documentation as well, so that can give you a run through of how you can implement your Prometheus queries. Metrics are calculated in terms of pricing, so this is another configuration to be aware of. We consider 30 gigabytes of metrics to be a single unit. So what that means is you can store a huge volume of metrics for the same price as you could store a far smaller volume of frequent search logs. So this is what I mean when I talk about the power of metrics in Coralogix. You can save a great deal of money by converting your data into metrics. You can do that within the Coralogix platform. We'll explore that later with the events to metrics feature. But this is just something to be aware of. It's really important that you know that metrics are calculated at a 5 cent per gigabyte or 30 gig per unit cost ratio. So take advantage of that, as much metrics as you want, because they're very, very cost effective by design. Finally, we'll take a look at where metrics are stored. So there are multiple different ways that metrics can be stored in the Coralogix platform. The easiest way to do this is to explore via the setup archive link here. So in setup archive, you can see that we've configured a metrics bucket. Now, for logs and traces, traces can be stored in index storage in the Coralogix platform, just like logs. For metrics, all metrics are stored in the S3 bucket, and that's why they have their own separate S3 bucket, by the way. What this means is that your metrics are always stored in a very cost-effective place. They also perform very, very well. So you saw before that we have the custom dashboards here. You can load large volumes of data with very little impact to performance. So you're producing a great deal of information there, and it's updating in real time. It's very, very fast. Everything happens instantly. This is because even though it's coming from S3, it's still very, very powerful, very, very performant. So that's something to be aware of when you're going through this. And the other thing you can mention as well is that if we go back to setup archive again, you can see here, you can actually set up retentions as well for your bucket as well. So this will govern how long metrics are retained for as part of your S3 bucket. So this is really, really powerful because you have complete control over your data. You can decide how long you hold on to it. Some data can be held onto for a short period of time and some for a long period of time, depending on your business need for that given metric. So we've kind of explored the basics of how to configure your metrics. We've talked about some of the common tools that people use, as well as some of the common sort of features that you would expect to find. And also we've discussed the role that PromQL plays in the Coralogix platform. Next, we're going to explore the features that Coralogix offers around the metrics pipeline, as well as what can be done in the Coralogix platform when you have your metrics in place. It's important to mention one key thing. When you set up your S3 bucket, the only requirement is that your S3 bucket is in the same region as your Coralogix account. So if you're in the European region of Coralogix, it should be a European S3 bucket as well. That's the only constraint, really. Beyond that, you can use it as you wish. So Let's have a look at some of the features and some of the setup that's available in Coralogix to enable you to really take advantage of the metrics that you've got. So let's take a look at some of the features available for metrics in Coralogix. To begin, we'll look at a metrics alert. So a metrics alert is really easy to define. You simply go to the alert screen and hit new alert, and you have these options here. When you select metric, you'll see the different the UI updates based on the different type of alarm. For metric, you can see here that you have a PromQL query. Now there are some important things to note here on the PromQL query. One of them is that you can write any query you like here, and Coralogix will consume it no problem. For other parts of the UI, for example, here in the standard type of alarm, you can define up to 2 group bys. For metrics, that goes up to as many as you want. So you can add as many as you like, and so on. You could add anything you want. So this is really, really powerful. It makes metrics very, very flexible, very easy to analyze, very easy to understand. So it's important to recognize that. Then you have these conditions down here. So once you've got your query right and you're happy with it, you can say if it's more than 100, if the value is more than 100, so this is in milliseconds, more than 100 milliseconds for over 10% of the last 10 minutes. So that means for a 10% period or for 10% of the past 10 minutes, the latency was over 100, or the average latency was over 100 for a given city, continent, and product. Then you can preview the alarm. So what this will tell you is how often would this thing have fired, and the answer is a lot. So buried underneath there is a white line that you might be able to just see, and this alarm goes way over there, so we know that we're way, way above that. So let's make that more like 2000. So when we refresh that now, you can see that the alarm is more appropriately configured. So we have this natural variance, but we have some high spikes. This is a really nice little tool that you can use just to visualize where your data is going to be. So you know that now 2 seconds is a reasonable configuration. And finally, you can set up notification groups just like you can with any alarm in Coralogix. So you can add webhooks for different endpoints. For example, I'll select the Slack group for the DevSec team. And we can set that to 30 minutes and also notify when resolved. For the Coralogix application, we'll say every 10 minutes, and we can add more and more to these as we want, including custom webhooks for self-remediation scripts and so on. Finally, you can set a schedule as well if you only want this alarm to trigger at certain times. So the metrics alarm is really, really powerful, really easy, clean way of defining clear metrics. The next thing we're going to look at is data map. So the data map can be accessed via the Explore screen and then in the data map tab here. Data map is great for visualizing lots of information in one clean and easy interface, especially when that information has the right labels on it. This really hinges on having a good labeling strategy. So you can see here that we have different countries, and as we zoom in further, you can see cities, and then each node represents a different product. These are actually page load times for a specific product page, so we can know how long the latency is. You'll also notice there are different colors. So if you select one of these, you'll see it's red. This is configured on the right-hand side here, and you'll see these thresholds have been defined. So green is essentially between 0 and 499. Amber is 500 milliseconds to 999. Like sort of a light red is 1000 to 1199, and then anything above 1200 milliseconds is considered serious. We can change this threshold, so we can say actually that we've just seen that 2000 is kind of happening a lot. So you can change that, and it would update the colors on the graph immediately. You can also change the ordering of these as well. These are all the different labels that are attached to the load time metric. So you can change the ordering of these to change the configuration of the data map as you like. Be aware you can only choose 3. So pick wisely. Yeah, you'll also notice this here. This dash indicates there isn't enough data to determine the color. So if you see this, it just means that there isn't enough information present for it to be able to work out what the color should be. So perhaps no one's going to that page, perhaps there's something wrong with the metrics being generated from that page, but that's just what that means. You'll notice in most cases it doesn't happen that often because metrics tend to be pretty consistent. You can see it a couple of times down here as well. Next, we'll look at custom dashboarding. So custom dashboarding is really easy in Coralogix, and you can reach it through the dashboard and custom dashboards here. If we select any of these visualizations, I'll select the line chart. You can set the source here to metrics. And what this will do is it will change in the bottom here, if I just move myself, I'll change the bottom here to a PromQL query. And you can select any PromQL query you like, and it will graph it in much the same way as you might expect. So for example, if I check load time here, it automatically updates that for me. And what this enables me to do is I can set different values. So for example, I can say average this load time by, I don't know, let's say city. And automatically we have a grouping by city. So really, really nice, really, really powerful. And you can group this by as much as you want. So you can say city, country, continent, and it will automatically render these out by different values here. You can also change the units and the legend as well. So you'll see here that it's just showing city and country at this stage. You can change that to be like this, and what this will do is it will only input the country there. So you can set this to be whatever you like. This is a really nice way of customizing the graph, and of course you can set the unit as well. So this is in milliseconds, and what that will do is now you can see that when you hover over, you see 414.88 milliseconds rather than just a random number. So it's a really nice way. It just makes the graphs much more pleasant to use and much more user friendly. The next one we'll look at is events to metrics. We won't get super into this purely because there's another video on it, but events to metrics allow you to take your traces and your logs and convert them to metrics. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that metrics are very cost effective, and this is a good example of how to make the most out of these metrics. So you can take logs and traces, which are more expensive to store, convert them to metrics, hold them for a very, very long time, like a year, 2 years, and pay a fraction of the cost. So events to metrics are a really, really powerful cost optimization tool that enable customers to retain their data, keep their insights, keep it flexible and accessible, but without having to pay the huge premium that one might expect. Another way to access metrics is actually via the log screens. This is just the standard Explore dashboard here and the logs. This up here can be used to visualize logs or metrics. So if I select this here, I can do an average. I can go to our load time metric that we used before. I can then compare it to, say, an hour ago and apply that. And what this will do is it will show me the average load time, over the thing. And this is a metric. And one of the really nice features that this has, if I select a field or a time window in this metric, it will show me the logs for that time window as well. So if you see a spike in load time, you can zoom in on that load time spike in the metric, and it will show you the logs for that same time as well. So really, really nice way of zooming in on that kind of really efficient, really easy problem solving way of just a nice troubleshooting journey for you there. The next thing I'll look at is the data usage dashboard. So the data usage dashboard can be accessed down here in settings. This will show you how much data you're using. So you see the current month, it's currently the 1st of June, so there's very little data, but you can go to the last 30 days and you can see this. This gives you an idea of how much data is being used, what use case by the TCO optimizer, but crucially it'll also show you things like metrics as well. And you can see this enable data usage metrics here. When you switch this, it enables dashboards like this. So this gives you an idea of how much data you're actually using. This, you'll notice, is a custom dashboard, so you can build anything you want out of this data. It essentially just generates the raw data for you, and you can do as you please with it. So this is one of the real powers of the Coralogix sort of platform. We're just going to explore some of the extra features that are also available with regards to metrics in the Coralogix platform. So on the top right here, you'll notice this menu icon. The menu icon will show you things like Grafana, Jaeger, and Cabana. This is because these are all available within the Coralogix platform. You kind of get your own instance as part of your account. So if we select Grafana here, Grafana has access to all of your metrics as you would expect before. So we can show this dashboard here is showing Kubernetes host metrics. It also has this nice explore screen, and if we use the load time metrics as we were doing before, you can see everything in there as well. So Grafana is nice if you really prefer open source tooling. Feel free to use this. It's obviously got the advantage of being Grafana. So if you have existing dashboards, you can paste those in and use it like any other Grafana instance. It's completely up to you. The second thing to mention is that if you have your own Grafana instance that you wish to use, Coralogix can actually be set up as a data source for that Grafana instance. So that's how that works. Check the documentation for how to do that. It's really easy to do. The next use case I want to explain is using actions. So actions are really, really important because they enable you to connect your different data types and different features together, or connect your application in Coralogix to a completely separate service. So here's how they work. If I go into actions here, I select one of the values and I highlight over actions. Just because I've clicked this value, by the way, it doesn't have any bearing. It's just a value in the log. I can click anywhere in the log and it'll have the same outcome. Now, if I select this, I can go to Kubernetes host dashboard. So I'm sat in the logs and I can see an info level log here about one of my applications. And if I click K8's host dashboard here, what this will do is it'll take me to the Kubernetes dashboard and show me a bunch of metrics around memory and network and disk and CPU and so on. This is a really nice way of connecting together various different data types within Coralogix, and this is just a nice little example. So the way you do that, if we go to actions and we select manage actions here, we open up K8's host dashboard, you'll see here that there's a URL template. And that's because everything happens in the browser when it comes to actions. So it's essentially a redirect. But the power of it is if we go to the right a little bit, you can see this value here, document Kubernetes node hostname. Now what this means is that I'm pulling the actual value out of the log and saying, okay, show me the Kubernetes infrastructure dashboard, but only show it by the host name. And you'll see here that you've got this nice autocomplete. So if you want to change that for whatever reason, you can. And then you got host name, instance type, and so on. So this is very, very easy to connect all your data together. You'll see these template things here. So if you ever want to include a value, you can just do the double things, and that'll trigger a templating action. You'll also notice the data type is log. You can also set these up for data map as well. So you can have connections between your data map view and your logs or another application, or if there's an IP address, you can connect to the VirusTotal database or whatever you want. But custom actions enable customers to connect all of their different data types together, and it's a really, really powerful metrics use case. So these are just some of the really nice things that you can do with the Coralogix platform once you've got it. There are two very common troubleshooting scenarios in Coralogix metrics. The first is that metrics aren't appearing, and the second is that metrics aren't staying in the system for very long. These two are typically caused by different issues. So the first one is commonly caused by the data not being sent to Coralogix in the first place. So if you want to check if data is actually being ingested, if metrics are being ingested into Coralogix, the easiest thing you can do is go to the custom dashboards layout, create a dashboard with a visualization, select metrics as the source. And what you can do is you can select here. This will give you all the labels that are present, but if any data has been ingested, these labels will be there, so you'll know that data is going into Coralogix. Likewise, you can also use the dialog down here, and it will autocomplete with metric names, and so on. So what this enables you to do is to actually check if metrics are making their way to Coralogix. If nothing is here in Coralogix, the chances are there's something wrong with your collector and your exporter that we mentioned at the start. So go and troubleshoot those and make sure that the configuration is in place, nothing is being blocked, the correct metrics are being exposed by your exporter, and so on. The second case is when data isn't being retained for very long. So you may see something that looks like this. Whenever you open events to metrics, you may see you must configure a metrics S3 bucket. They'll be deleted after 3 hours. What happens with metrics is they are ingested into Coralogix via Victoria metrics, and they are held in Victoria metrics for a few hours. They're cached, and then they are pushed out to S3. If you don't have an S3 bucket for metrics, then you can't retain for longer than that. So it's necessary that you have your S3 bucket in place. The way you solve that problem, really straightforward: data flow, setup archive. Got those changes, and you can just go through the documentation that's available here, and that will tell you about how to set up your relevant bucket, as well as set up KMS encryption if you want to make managed encryption at rest, and also how to set up things like data retention policies and such as well. So if your data isn't being held for very long in Coralogix, it's very, very likely that you haven't set up the S3 bucket, and you can validate that by going to your events to metrics page here, and looking at the top of the page, you'll see something like this indication here. And this will tell you that you must configure metrics in an S3 bucket. It'll be deleted after 3 hours. That tells you your S3 bucket for metrics has not been set up properly. So those are just two of the really, really common situations that happen with metrics. And hopefully these will iron out most of your problems for you. You've got it. So we've covered a variety of different things. We've looked at configuration, setting up the archive, all of the different features that exist in the Coralogix platform and what you can do with them with regards to metrics, some of the common problems that one might experience around data not appearing in Coralogix and how to troubleshoot that, or data not being retained in Coralogix past a few hours. And now we've just looked at some of the nice little use cases that exist within the Coralogix platform to really show off what can be done. So in this video, we've really explored the whole realm of metrics within Coralogix. Be sure to constantly check the documentation. The platform is always updating and always changing and adding new features. So be mindful of that and enjoy the platform, enjoy using metrics in Coralogix. The performance, the scalability, the cost optimization, completely unrivaled. So no doubt you'll have every success possible with it.